Evidence that you're a Christian, you're no longer a slave to fear. I've watched, specifically over the last few years, I've watched professed Christians. They fly the banner of Christianity. I've watched them walk around filled with fear. Filled with fear and an ever-increasing fear. A fear that is afraid of death. You see, when you have the Spirit of God in you, you're not afraid of death. You know that to live is Christ, to die is gain. You're not afraid of it. I've watched a government instill fear in people. I watched Joe Biden trying to lie to everybody, telling this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It's so stupid. And we know, because we have the Spirit of God in us, we see what it is. This is an attempt to instill fear in the masses, because you can't control people that aren't fearful. You have to instill fear to control people. I watched Joe Biden say stupid things like, people don't have to die, trying to get them to get vaccinated. People, you remember when he said that? People don't have to die. Yeah, they do, Joe. 1 out of every 2. One out of every 1. It's a statistic. Everyone's going to die, Joe. Everyone. No, people don't have to. They just got to get vaccinated. No. Vaccinated or unvaccinated, you're going to die. So dumb. But these people are filled with fear. Even though God says that He's going to be in you. He's going to send His Spirit. You're going to be born again by His Spirit. And 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says that God has not given us a spirit of fear. If you have the Spirit of God in you, that is not a spirit of fear. If there's some spirit of fear about you, it is not God. It is the enemy. The Spirit that God has given us is a spirit of power and of love and a sound mind. It is a mind that can see everything that's going on, calculate for ourselves, and discern what is true and untrue. We see it. We have a sound mind. We can think clearly. We don't need anybody telling us how we should think or what we should think, because we got the Spirit of God in us. He gives us a sound mind. We don't have to walk around in fear. That's not the Spirit of God. And that's a test. Am I fearful? Am I walking around in fear all the time? If so, we have to ask, do I even have the Spirit of God? I want to share with you about a friend of mine. His name is Dan Maidment. Some of you went to church here a few years ago, more than a few years ago, and you know who I'm talking about. This was right at the beginning. I've known him for years, and he's been a wonderful, he's an incredible man of God. And right at the beginning of the whole pandemic, everybody's trying to figure everything out, and I knew right away that this was evil. I knew it was wrong, and I didn't like watching people walk around in fear. And on a Friday evening, he wrote something. I'm going to share it with you. He wrote this out and put it out on social media. He said, as a child, I feared a part of my bedtime prayer. If I should die before I wake, I pray thee, Lord, my soul to take. I was always afraid of death, the end of life, the termination of familial relationships, of friendships, the opportunities to experience love, a deprivation of knowing what could have been in my future, a bride, of children and grandchildren, of relationships with others, of achievement in a career field, of making a legacy that would define my life. I no longer harbor that fear. As I've grown older, I have seen my grandparents and then my parents pass, and now some of my cousins. I've been reminded of my mortality as well. Yet as they've passed, and I've realized my time on earth is closer to the end than the beginning, I contemplate what would define my life. Have I accomplished that for which I was destined? If I were to die today, What would I be known for? How would they remember me? I've heard it said that an effective combat soldier must assume and accept that they are going to die in battle before they can assume the obligation to attack against a lethal enemy. By acknowledging and relinquishing that fear of death, I feel strangely liberated to tackle the task that those attached to earthly life might choose to avoid: caring for the sick, feeding the poor, attending to the homeless and destitute, and more currently, going out among a population that may contain deadly virus that threatens their lives and possibly my own. The thought is strangely invigorating. Now that I've got more time, absent the requirements of a career and family raising and retirement planning, what can I do to be self-actualized and feel personally that my life was worthwhile? How can I most profitably spend the balance of my days? I don't have that answer, but I'm working on it, no longer with fear. He was not willing that what was happening, and bear in mind, this happened right at the beginning. He was not willing that fear would overtake him. That was a Friday that he wrote this and put this out on social media. On Sunday, he came into church and we did ministry. And it was the Sunday where I was like, I ain't doing this. We're not doing mass. We're not doing, we're open. And we did ministry all day that day. And he came up to me afterwards. He said, Pastor Tim, this was my favorite day of ministry ever. This was the best day. And the next day, I got a call that Dan had died. And I'm a chaplain for the sheriff's department. I went out, and everybody's afraid of COVID. Nobody wanted to touch him. So I had to help lift my friend, his dead body, lift him up and put him into the back of the van for the coroner's office. And my heart sank. And I thought, what a beautiful gift God had given me to have this man in my life and to have him write this letter and post this out on a Friday and come in on a Sunday and do ministry all day and then die of a heart attack the next day. I can't think of a better example than Dan Maidman of a man who could answer these questions that I just gave today. He could answer them unequivocally, that he knows where he's going. He is not afraid of death. He loves people. That man spent so much time loving the unlovable. There were people that he would spend time with that nobody else wanted to spend time with. He would pour into their lives. He was always at the church, always working. And he was a man that God used in my life, helped hold me accountable. He was 73 years old. And he had a relationship with me to where if I needed to be corrected, he would correct me. And I respected him enough that I received that from him. He tested himself. He examined his own life. Paul says, test yourself. See if Christ is in you. Dan knew Christ was in him. I want to challenge you. Test yourself. Examine your life. Can you say that Christ is in you? Do you know if you died today, do you know you're going to heaven? Do you know why you are? Can you give a reason for the hope that lies in you?